Hey everyone, welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy, I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. And once again, I am recording one of these intros while I'm incredibly tired. Hey, for longtime listeners of the show, I seem to record these introductions only when I'm barely hanging on to consciousness. I'll tell you what. I wonder if it's just getting older that you have trouble sleeping. Hey, other people who are aging, please tell me, is this normal or do I have some kind of psychosis? Anyway, hey, if you read the New York Times, I think today, the print edition, and it was already online, but my other podcast that I do with Naomi, Couples Therapy, there was a big old article about couples podcasts. And there's a solid 5 entire paragraphs about me and Naomi in there. So that's pretty cool, right? I mean, I know the New York Times, championed the Iraq War and has done a lot since 2016 to, I don't know about bolster, but they certainly write a lot of articles about white supremacists. But I would say on the art side, I think there's still a lot of cool stuff for the New York Times. Today's episode, real weird one for many reasons. Primarily because both the host and the guest are two oddballs trying to figure out how to communicate. But this is Natalie Palamides. If you don't know who Natalie is, let me read you her bio. Originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, comedian and actor Natalie Palamides' path to comedy started with clowning and devised theater with the Obie Award-winning Pig Iron Theater Company. After moving to Los Angeles, she became an official performer at UCB and since then has garnered a number of accolades, including being named a Just for Laughs New Face in 2016 and Best Newcomer at the Edinburgh Comedy Awards in 2017. Natalie is also a voice actor working on a number of cartoons like Bob's Burgers, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, and most notably, she voices Buttercup on the reboot of the Powerpuff Girls. I saw Natalie at Just for Laughs in 2016. Naomi was a Just for Laughs new face for stand-up. Mind you, she was a new face the same year that she recorded her Comedy Central half hour. Natalie was a new face in the characters, and she was by far my favorite. And this is no offense, because I have a lot of friends who were doing characters that year and who were great. Frank Hale, wonderful. But Natalie just blew me away. Her stuff was so strange, yet I describe her in the early part of this. I say that it reminded me a lot about Murder Fist. If you don't know Murder Fist, they were this New York sketch group for about 10 years. They still perform every once in a while. But maybe you might know Henry Zebrowski. He's a big part of it. You might know him from Last Podcast on the Left or the Adult Swim show Your Pretty Face is Going to Hell and a bunch of other stuff. It's the same kind of like psychologically unhinged, but just like very well put together, if that makes sense. So Natalie and I on this have a pretty wide-ranging conversation about growing up in Pittsburgh and being an odd kid and how, the big thing I was curious about was I was an odd kid too, but I kind of repressed it and hid it. And she allowed her oddness to flourish in a certain way. And I think that was the primary thing I wanted to figure out going in. I think we do it by the very end. Also, like 3 minutes into this, GarageBand shut down totally. We kind of recapped the first couple minutes in the restarted version, but I sweated. I was neurotic and paranoid for, the first half of the interview. So just giving you a little bit of where I was emotionally during this. By the way, if you are a new listener to Beginnings, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you want to listen to other episodes, all episodes are up on Spotify. All episodes are up at beginnings.libsyn.com if you want to download the MP3s. I've done tons of interviews with writers and performers and musicians. Why Henry Zebrowski? The aforementioned Henry Zebrowski has been on the show before. Andy Daly's been on the show. If you're a UCB head, why, most of the founders of UCB, Matt Besser and Matt Walsh and Ian Roberts, have been on the show. If you're a fan of just weird UK comedy, I've talked to everyone from Aisling Bea to Josie Long. So check out those episodes. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Play or Stitcher. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Andy Beckerman. Okay, thank you so much for listening. And now, let's talk to Natalie. So now we're restarting this.
Are we rehashing?
So the recording just unexpectedly quit. And I was saying that I had a lot of anxiety because Naomi and I were talking about
Buying a car.
And now I'm sweating. So I've doubled the anxiety because the technology just fucked up.
And I told Andy to take some B vitamins to help support his central nervous system.
So you were saying you had mild OCD from uncontrollable thoughts of murder, and I was saying I have the same kind of thing. I don't know if it's the same kind of impulse in me, but driving a car, anytime where like I'm like walking down a stairwell, my brain goes, you could fall and die. You could just trip and that's it. That's the end of everything. In a car, if I'm driving it, it's just like this. Anytime I can control whether or not I die.
Yes.
My brain pops into my head.
It's that same thing of like, somebody's crossing in front of you at a crosswalk and you're worried that you might press the gas and run over them. Even though you know that you don't want to, you could. And so you're afraid of losing control. And but it's not about like wanting to murder, to be clear.
But when you said a couple years ago, you had these thoughts. Was there any kind of, when you said uncontrollable, was it just like it was constantly flooding into your head? Or was it in just those moments where you were on the precipice of mortality?
During that spell, it was pretty constant, and so like I didn't even want to go into the grocery store because I was like, what if I strangle someone in the grocery store?
Okay, so it was actually like preventing you from living your life in a real way.
Yeah, a little bit. It was for, and looking back, I can see like moments when I showed symptoms of when I was a kid. Like when I was a kid, when I first learned the F word, I would hear in my head this voice saying like, fuck, fuck, fuck. And, I came up with a phrase, flick the fly off the French fry. So anytime the F word came into my head, I would, go into that phrase. I would use that phrase to cope with it. But I see points throughout my life where like, I'm like, oh yeah, that was kind of like an OCD symptom. But I think it hits me during periods of stress. But ever since I've been taking 2 specific vitamins, inositol and CDP choline. And those are both B vitamins, and they really helped me.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Well, you said in the lost 3 minutes of talking that your mom is into homeopathic kinds of things. She's the one that suggested that to you when your psychiatrist suggested Lexapro.
Yeah.
So, you're from Pittsburgh, right?
Yes.
That's the one thing. I was very excited to talk to you because not just because I was a fan of your sketch and characters, but also I went to University of Pittsburgh. I lived in Pittsburgh for another 3 years after that.
No way.
I'm from Pennsylvania, so very excited to talk to a fellow Pennsylvanian.
Yeah, right on. Where are you from in Pennsylvania?
Reading, Pennsylvania.
Reading, I know it. Very cool.
Other side of the state.
Yeah, and you decided to go to Pittsburgh. I went to IUP.
Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
great.
I usually party.
Yeah.
So
I have friends that went there who
Right
are
on.
now filmmakers and noise musicians. And
oh, noise musician, that's cool.
there's something about Pittsburgh. There was something for me, at least, about Pittsburgh. I found it to be, and you're about a decade younger than me, so I don't know how things changed or how
Am
it
I
was for
really
you.
a decade young? Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
What?
I don't do.
You look like, I would say you look like my age.
I don't do drugs or drink really, and I
Keeps you young?
Yeah,
Preserved?
so I look in the right angles. I look younger.
All right. Well, you're working those angles right now.
Thank you.
Welcome.
It was I was part of the music scene there and kind of like the weird art scene, and I found it to be a very inclusive and encouraging art scene. I don't know if you were part of that at all or what your experience was of living in Pittsburgh. Just because I asked this because I find the characters you play or the sketches that you write, there's a kind of like unhingedness in some way, or there's a kind of like, have you ever seen the sketch group Murder Fist, or do you know like Henry Zabrowski or any of those guys?
No, I'll have to look that up. Murder Fist?
Yeah, you might
Sounds
like
like it's
them
up
a
my
ton.
alley. I'll write that down.
But they were a New York sketch group for about a decade.
Oh, whoa. Damn.
And
All right.
that I the same kind of thing that excited me about them excited me about your work. So I'm wondering
nice.
in what way, if we can find something about Pittsburgh, or if there's there may not be. It may just be like something you got interested in, some way of performing.
Yeah. Well, I was raised outside the city in a suburb. So
Ooh, which suburb?
Peters Township. Do you know?
Which?
South Hills?
Yes, South Hills.
South Hills. So and then at 18, I went to IUP, which is out in the middle of, nowhere. And then I moved to LA pretty much right after school. So, and I worked in Philadelphia a little bit with Pig Iron Theater Company. And I think at university, I had a really cool professor, Dr. Richard Kemp, who introduced me to clown and devised theater. And he actually invited Pig Iron to come do a residency at our school. And I think that is where I started to shape my voice. I mean, I had always done kind of weird sketch comedy and art, even in high school, middle school. I was always just kind of weird, I guess. But
I get that.
yeah, but whenever I was first introduced to devised theater was when I started to shape how I make my work. And during my senior year, worked in Philadelphia with Pig Iron, so I would go back and forth a little bit to help them workshop a play. And the way that they work, which is their own style of devised theater, is they have a room full of costumes, and they have music supervisor there, or somebody to do music. They have somebody to do costumes and makeup and all these different consultants. And then they have about 8 theater artists, and they give you prompts every half hour throughout the day to create pieces in the direction of the play they're trying to make. So the play that we made was called I Promised Myself to Live Faster. And it was about, it was inspired by this guy, Charles Ludlam, who was famous for doing classical plays in drag, which was super campy and funny, but he was still able to move people to tears.
When you say you mean like Chekhov or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. Camille was one of his famous works that he did in drag. And so we were experimenting, playing in that world where where does funny cross into truly sad, and where is melodrama in between that? And so I just really loved working with them and their free way of exploring these topics. And so, yeah, you would get a prompt throughout the day, like every half hour. And so like every half hour, you'd have to make a new scene or a new piece, and you'd put it up for everyone, and we all talk about it, and they would videotape everything. And then at the very end, the director would work with a playwright, and they'd go back through and watch all the tapes and like put together a play. And I just loved that way of working, like, you know, how like on your feet like that and with the audience. And that's a big part of clown, is letting the audience inform where you go. And you always follow the laugh. So like if they laugh at something, you follow that thing and heighten that and build that. So when I came out to LA, I wanted to, you know, get back to that. And
I mean, there's something interesting. I was a weird kid. I want to talk more about that. But I also got into, I mean, when I was writing sketch, I was in a sketch duo, and it was just, it bordered on nonsense because it was so crazy. And we never were able to figure out a middle point between the insanity that we wanted to perform, or we wanted to write, or we wanted to inspire some kind of like, I grew up watching a lot of British comedy, watching like Mr. Show and all that kind of stuff, but also just like a lot of British stuff and like Mighty Boosh and Snuffbox and things like that. And trying to combine those things together just made something that was even more insane. And I was like, oh, okay, if I want to connect with an audience, maybe I have to just do something a little more normal. Maybe is not the right word, but something like that.
Find something, some way to relate, or
yes,
like pull them in,
as opposed to like 30 layers of lunacy. And then like, duh, why didn't you get that? So,
once you pull people in, then you can go nuts.
Well, that's the thing where it's just like, I'm curious as to, you know, I guess, would you call this like experimental theater? Is devised? Is that the word you used?
Devised theater,
Is that their term, or is that like a term in theater?
That's a term in theater. And there's different ways of going about it too. It's essentially like creating theater through improvisation or through found information. It's just like a really free way of building plays. But people have their own ways of going about it.
The thing I'm curious about is, you know, especially moving out to LA, it's doesn't seem to be a very friendly town to anything that's not like, I don't know, Real Housewives or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm curious as to your experience with coming from like a clown background, from this, what I'm calling experimental theater. I don't know if you would use that phrase, but
yeah,
like,
you can use that. Yeah. Well, so like, I do want to add that devised theater is also known for being like a collaborative art form, and yes, largely stems from improvisation at the root. I think that's more clear definition of it. But so when I first came to LA, you know, of course I got into like all the comedy schools, iOS, UCB, Groundlings. I was doing the whole gamut. And I loved doing all those schools, but I missed and craved the theatricality that came from doing work with Pig Iron. And one day I was doing background work on Pretty Little Liars. And I had dropped candy on the ground or something. And I just had said to the other background people, like, I'm still going to eat this. And one girl laughed, and we started talking, and she had just started taking classes with this clown from Cirque du Soleil. His name's John Gilkey, and he just started teaching these classes called the Idiot Workshop. And, you know, I had, you know, got to talking with her and told her that I was in clown, and she's like, you should sign up for this class, the Idiot Workshop. And I did, which, you know, joining that group, a group like that or a class like that attracts a bunch of weirdos, you know, like people who want to do clown.
If you are doing something a little more odd, there are certain pathways you can take in this town that aren't just like being an actor on a, I'm trying to not
Big
name
Bang
it. I'm trying to not name. Yes, thank you. Not name a show that a friend of mine works on. I'm like, something. There has to be one out there. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So there's other outlets for clowns, especially Vegas.
Yeah, I never even thought about that. To me, I've never been there, but in my head, it's just like.
You've never been to Vegas?
No, in my head, it feels like a gross place, just like dripping with sadness.
It is a bit, but there's a growing art scene there and some cool people and really good Venezuelan food, I gotta say.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. So, going back to the weird thing, when you were a kid, like when I say I was a weird kid, I mean, I was into like things that other people weren't into. Not necessarily like, it was not like I was like, watching Brackage films or something like that. Yeah. I just mean like whatever, Weird Al or something like that. Or even like indie rock when I was in high school.
Yeah.
But it was enough, the interests were off enough that, especially in Pennsylvania, that I didn't fit in with most people. I didn't even fit in really with my family.
Aww.
So...
yeah, I was definitely, are you asking like in what ways was I weird?
Yeah. Like what is weird for you and what did that mean in terms of like fitting in?
Right. Well, the first thing that comes to mind, and this is something that I did with my cousin, and she was also like a bit of a weirdo who like dressed really goth, and now she's married and like, goes to church and she's really sweet. But, we used to collect worms and name all of them Arnold and keep them under my bed and try to keep them alive.
In something?
In, that kind of like toy that you have when you're a toddler and you like hit the rubber ball through a hole and it like goes down a ramp.
I kind of...
We filled a child's toy with dirt and put them in there, and we slept on the floor next to them and kept them under my bed. It was so weird, but we would always do it like pretty much every time we got together, like dig up worms and name them Arnold, and then every night they would die and dry up. Yeah. Your
parents never found out?
They were probably like, what are you doing with that thing of dirt, like under your bed? Or why are you sleeping under the floor? I might have mentioned it to them, but I don't think they really thought anything of it. I think they're just like, whatever.
I had caterpillars in a old cookie tin.
Huh.
And I kept them in there this happened once because when my parents found out, my dad freaked out. He's like, they're going to turn into moths and they're going to eat our clothes. And like, I remember,
they're going to turn into moths and eat your clothes.
This had to have been just like maybe 48 hours that I had them because I took them I remember taking them to school because I had, I had to have been, I was in the gifted program in grade school.
Me too.
I remember taking, whatever the day it was that we went off for 3 hours to play Oregon Trail or whatever. I took the caterpillars with me.
Yeah.
And I showed them to everyone. And then I think maybe that night my dad found out and flipped.
That sounds like a really good start to a horror film. Like those moths are going to grow and eat all your clothes, or caterpillars, whatever. Yeah.
It's a Jewish horror film where my dad's all his fantasies about our clothes being ruined, and
that's pretty good. You should make that. It's a good short.
I found that my creativity has been a little stifled out here. Like I can write the stuff, whatever writing samples I have to write, but I was looking at, I forget why I had to look at it, but I had to look at like the video, my YouTube channel. I don't know why I like stumbled there because I didn't want to admit that I had a YouTube channel in 2019. And I realized like I haven't made a video in like 2 years.
Damn.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Yeah. I know like a bunch of people out here, but I don't know a lot of people that like in New York specifically. Well, this is the thing in Pittsburgh. And again, I want to go back to like your experience, creating things, as a child. But like when I was there in college and part of the music scene, one of the things I loved and I think like the real the real thing that like pushed me to want to actually do this for a living was that it was such a DIY scene, and it was such if you had an idea, there were people there that would help you make that idea real. Like my friend, and when we started doing sketch there, my writing partner at the time and I made 3 full sketch, like taped video sketch shows. Like one was like 80 minutes long. One was like 45 minutes long.
That's amazing.
And then the final one was filmed in an old abandoned church in Braddock. And we had like, you know, the mayor of Braddock let us do this and like gave us the keys to the church. Like it was such a, it was amazing to have like a kind of support system that I haven't felt really since.
Yeah.
I mean, in New York to an extent, but by the time I moved to New York and started doing UCB stuff, a lot of it was like very professionalized. Like if you wanted someone to film your sketches, you had to pay them. They weren't just going to like help out because they thought it was a fun idea.
Yeah. It's different hopping into the big cities from like a town where like anyone's excited to make anything. It's same as like even getting a location like in Pittsburgh. People will be like, oh yeah.
The mayor of Braddock just let us use the church because it was no one else was using it.
That's amazing. Yeah. People just get more on board for it because they're stoked, I guess. But yeah. I guess you were asking about like making stuff when I was a kid. So I want to show you. Can I show you a video?
Sure.
This is like, let's see. This is like, I made this with my cousin. This is 8th grade. And it was a character I did called Zelbanort. It was like king of the elf realm. And this is like kind of like a good example. My dad's in this video and it like shows how he like kind of reacted to me or like how my parents dealt with me, which was like just pretty much ignored me.
I'm going to now eat breakfast. Hello, Father. Today is the last day of school.
Natalie.
My name is Zelbanort, and nothing other. Sir, to call me that. Zelbanort, I say. Don't call me anything. The king of the elf realm.
Anyway, yeah. So I would just like, my cousins and I would just like mess around and make videos like that.
Yeah. So you were already making weird stuff when you were a kid, like making it. Like I guess I did stuff like that too. I remember my friends and I made a video. This was in high school. We were bored one night and we made a video called Crooked Cops. Like it was like shot like cops, like
wow,
that
that's
style.
before your time.
And they were just like extremely. I guess 2 of my friends, I guess they had like police costumes, and we just went around and we shot like all night, I guess, in different locations. I played a wizard, like an insane man. Mm-hmm. Like I had a cone on, like a parking cone on my head and a towel wrapped around and I pretended I was a wizard, and the cops.
That's so
my friends
good.
Dressed as cops like arrested me and then I think executed me. I think the thing was like at the end of every time they arrested someone off camera, they executed them. I think that was the joke.
Nice.
But yes, so yes, yeah. So same kind of thing. Mm-hmm. What were your parents like? You said that they were they kind of ignored the weirdness in some way.
Yeah, I think maybe I was just always kind of like out there or goofy. My neighbors who also pretty much raised me always called me the goof. And me and my friend Jen, who they like raised me, we'd always make videos too. But yeah, I think that they were just used to like, I don't know, they made this like weird kid. I was always like pretty weird or goofy, even, from a really young age. So I think they're just like, okay. And just like, let me do my thing, but never made a big deal of it. Or they never told me I was weird. They just kind of ignored it as if it was normal.
Were you okay with them ignoring it? Would you have rather
I probably wanted their attention, which is like why I did it. But yeah.
Well, I don't know if I had control. I think I just, my interests were strange, and that just put me off on a different path. I think, I don't know. I mean, it's tough to like really remember back to like early. I just remember, the playing these, I had like, I don't know, hundreds of like tiny rubber like it wasn't just the same kind. Like I was trying to think of like, it's not like the same, like some were those rubber monsters you get like with you put on your fingers. Some were just like plastic gnomes, and some like all like, some were just like, I would take apart like action figures and then glue the pieces together, or like paint them to be. So I had like,
that's so cool.
I had all these like creatures, and I would have these kind of like massive adventures that had continuity. So if something happened to them in one quote unquote adventure, like I'm playing with them after school at like when I'm like 5 or 6 or whatever, then the next time this whatever happened to them that time carried over.
Yeah.
And I don't like, there isn't a like, I credit like growing up Jewish in a pretty Christian area to pushing me kind of like to the side a little bit, to like injecting some otherness into me. Yeah. But this was way before I even knew what any of that meant or could like pick up on it really. Yeah. So I must have been like odd from an early age to do that kind of stuff without, and I don't know where. I
bet you were odd. I don't think gluing your dolls together has anything to do with being Jewish.
No, it does. Yeah, that's the thing. Like I'm just trying to figure out like where, like I don't know where it came from in me. I don't know if you've ever thought of it. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think your mind is probably just a little bit different, or like, yeah, different people are attracted to different things, and you're gifted also, so your mind probably works in a different capacity or notices things that most people wouldn't. Everybody's different, that's what makes the world go round.
Besides your parents, how did other people react?
They would laugh at me, and then I liked it and would do it more.
Yeah, I wonder if that's it too. That like I would get that reaction from other people, and so maybe that kind of like, oh well, I'll keep going in this direction.
Yeah, my neighbors who I mentioned raised me earlier. Whenever I would eat at their house, which was quite frequently, they said I ate as if I was raised by wolves. But I liked the reaction I got from them. So I would like hold spaghetti in my hands and hold it above my head and eat it like that. And they'd be like, Natalie, what are you doing? So I think they fostered it a bit, me being like supporting the weirdness,
Were you like that at school too?
Yeah, I think I was always just like playing with different stuff because I had gotten like positive reactions from it. But then also unintentionally, like at school lunches, kids made fun of me because my mom packed me dolma, like stuffed grape leaves.
Oh, yeah.
Which, is like a Greek food, but I guess, they said it like looked like dog poo. And I was like, whatever, it's good. But yeah, I mean, my parents are definitely characters as well. They're not your typical. So I don't know if that had anything to do with, if that influenced me at all. I'm sure it has.
In what way are they characters?
Oh, my mom is like all business, very high energy, and doesn't give a fuck what anybody thinks about her. And then my dad is always doing like a lot of different voices. He's like life of the party, and he wears his heart on his sleeve.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, if you ask anybody who knows my parents, they're like, oh, geez, Becky and Dale. Yeah, they're a pair. They're a pair.
For the most normal names, by the way.
Becky and Dale?
Yeah.
It's
that's just
very
like,
Midwest.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Where did they come from? So your mom's packing you stuffed grape leaves.
Yeah. She just likes those. I mean, my parents love like weird food. They're both from Pittsburgh, but my dad's family is like Italian heritage, and then my mom's family is Ukrainian and Serbian heritage. Even though a lot of people think my last name is Greek, which it is, like it stems from Greek ancestors. I wasn't raised culturally Greek. Yeah, but we always went to the Greek food festival. My family loves food. We love to eat. I'm a foodie. I like Every time I take a bite of something that's good, you know, which annoys some people, I'm always like, you know, so I just love to enjoy my food.
Okay, maybe this is the thing that I think of. There was for me at least, my weirdness early on in my life, I connected with some kind of shame where I'm like, I'm like, oh, maybe it's not good to be weird. I can't not be weird in some way, but I'm also feel bad about it.
You felt bad about it.
Yeah, in some way. It seems like, I wonder if I was getting kind of negative reinforcement from like my family. Like my family never like said, they never like stopped me, but they were like, that's kind of weird. Like they were like, they're very normal.
Oh, yeah. My family never really acknowledged that it was like, they never like put any negativity to it or my weirdness. They would laugh at it, if anything, or like, you know, roll their eyes maybe, but like also coupled with a laugh. So it was always like pretty light. And then my mom even encouraged it. Like my mom's pretty creative and crafty. Like I remember when I was a kid, like one of like a project she just randomly did with me around the house was to make one of our hallways a forest. So like the forest in Wizard of Oz, because I loved that movie. And so we cut up a bunch of brown paper bags into like the shape of trees. And then we cut like apples out of construction paper and turned our hallway into like the forest from Wizard of Oz. So she's always pretty crafty, like making me costumes and stuff, and was always like really supportive of me doing theater, which I had always pretty much done since I was a kid. And yeah.
So it was encouraged, but there was also, not only was it encouraged, it also seems like you said your dad wore his heart on his sleeve. It also seems like there was a kind of vulnerability to it.
I guess, I mean, when he wears his heart on his sleeve, he loses his temper.
Oh.
Yeah, I was trying to paint him in a better light. Yeah, but like he's I don't want to say anything bad about my dad because he's like a really lovable guy, but he's definitely very Italian. If you can imagine like how Italians are with like expressing their emotions, you know, anything that upsets them, you know, like right away, I think is the stereotype, like Italian people like yelling at each other. That's very much like my dad's family.
They were not like weird people.
No, they're not weird people. They're like really well liked, and even I would venture to say like really popular when they were young. I can even show you like a picture I think I just sent to my brother and my cousin. Yeah, they were definitely like the popular kids, I would say, and like kind of well liked. Let's see. Here you go.
So in this picture, if I could describe it a little bit, your dad, muscly kind of guy.
They have their groups of friends. Like my mom's got her girlfriends. My dad's in a dad band that plays like mostly Beatles music. He likes to play the drums. And they like to have a good time and like go to parties and like Tom Petty concerts with their friends.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So that all makes sense.
Yeah.
They're normos.
They're normos. But
so how do you... This is the thing where I'm like, if you're getting these signals, like I never got like really disapproving signals, but also just like I definitely could pick up on like, man, this guy's weird about me. Mm-hmm. If you're not getting those signals, but it's still like you're surrounded by people who are kind of like normal, how do you think to like, I want to be in theater, I want to clown, eventually I want to move to Los Angeles?
I mean, I think it was like when I was a kid, like in school, that I noticed more that I was weird, like from the other kids at school than like in my family. But I don't know. I was just always attracted to making people laugh, and I kind of always knew I wanted to be a comedian. And my aunt asked me one time when I was like 10 or 11 what I wanted to do, and I said I wanted to be a comedian, and she was like, well, don't you want to do something that helps people, like doctor or teacher? And I was like, well, laughing helps people. And she's like, that's true. So that's kind of just like a nice story. But I just always love making people laugh. And I think I just picked up on when I did weird things or shocking things, you know, that people would laugh. And I liked it.
I wrestle with it a little bit where I do know that making people laugh helps. I mean, I remember when I got my first professional job, I was leaving my day job, and
that takes a lot of guts.
Well, I mean, I had to move to Los Angeles. This was like
shoot.
4 or 5 years ago now, and I was leaving my day job in New York, and so one of the like people there, I worked at like a university, and
oh, nice.
she pulled me aside and she was like, "Oh, I think it's really cool that you're doing this." After it sounds so self-serving or dumb to say this, but for me to say this, but like she said, like, you know, after 9/11, it seems so dumb. Again, I keep saying that, but like, she's like, the first time I laughed again, I was watching SNL or something like that. I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's good, because my parents wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that.
Of course,
too.
yeah.
It's your standard Jewish, you know,
Yeah.
whatever.
My parents really wanted me to go into business.
What?
But when I told them I wouldn't, they were still supportive. And they're like, okay.
You know, what's that like, having supportive? Not that my parents aren't supportive, but
Yeah,
they
well,
aren't.
They're supportive, but they also like don't like any of my comedy. Like my mom compares it to porn. And she's like, you know, I do a lot of voiceover work for like Disney and Cartoon Network, like kids shows, you know. And before I had gotten any of that kind of work, she told me Disney would never hire me because my comedy is porn. And she would write me like really long emails about how disgusting it was.
Oh, God.
Mm-hmm. And then one day I said, hey, Mom, you can't send me these emails anymore. They make me feel bad. And she did.
So you have a pretty emotionally healthy relationship with your parents and also like yourself in a way. The fact that you were able to, like, my parents have said they've never called my comedy porn. I remember I showed them one of those sketch shows that I filmed, I told you about earlier. And my dad was just impressed. It was almost like he was trying to, like, have you ever done a show and then afterwards someone's like, you looked like you were having fun up there?
Yeah.
His version of that was like he was impressed that I knew some I referenced Leni Riefenstahl, who's the chief propagandist for Hitler.
Wow.
I referenced
That's a deep
her.
dive.
Well, it was a weird sketch. The sketch was basically Leni Riefenstahl was making a kids movie, but the whole thing was basically that this like bumbling kid steals his grandfather's time machine and accidentally goes back in time and accidentally gives Moses the 10 Commandments. So Moses thinks he got the 10 Commandments from God, but really, so it was a very, yes, yeah, you're looking at me with wide eyes. It was very convoluted, but essentially it was supposed to be she's making this anti-Semitic like Disney type film.
Oh, that's amazing.
About a bumbling kid that accidentally. So there's no Jewish God. Basically, was what and he was like just excited that I knew Leni Riefenstahl, and but it seems like you have an emotionally healthy relationship with your parents, and like I said, like you're able to express your emotions.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's like so healthy, like emotionally with my parents, you know, but we're definitely like all able to, or I'm able to be open with them about like my true feelings, and maybe that's a testament to like working in theater and stuff like that. But they less so are able to like openly tell me like what they're actually feeling. You know, it's like a little bit harder for them to be vulnerable and to like give me good hugs.
Do you find that difficult? I didn't really start to like get bothered by it until I went into therapy myself. And then I started to be like, oh, there's a weird barrier here that I didn't notice before.
Yeah, it definitely bothers me. And I actually this Christmas wrote my parents like a long email about like my feelings and how I wish they could be more open with me. And, I was like, Mom, like I asked them if they would please go to therapy. And my mom's response was, Natalie, I went to therapy for over 10 years and it didn't do a thing. So I don't know.
All right.
So I was like, I kind of just gave in and I was like, yeah, no, these are my parents. And I, all I can do is ask, but if they're not going to change, like I just got to accept it or else, I don't think I would like have a relationship with them at all, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I have to reckon with. I also think about what is the quality of therapy? What are the quality of therapists in small town? I mean, Reading's not like a small town. Pittsburgh's not a small town, but, versus New York or Los Angeles.
I mean, I also wonder like the validity of her statement. I mean, I'm sure she went like, I don't know if she went for 10 years. I think like that definitely would have done some good, but she hyperboles a lot.
It's also like, did she do the work too? Like you could go, maybe she did go for 10 years, but you can go and just talk for 10 years and not do any actual work to change yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Both my parents are very like, stubborn and they just like think the way they see things is right. But whenever you do get through to them, it is really satisfying. Yeah.
So when I was growing up in Pennsylvania, especially like I had no family connections in show business or theater or anything like that. We come from immigrant Jews who like worked in diners and stuff in New York. And then my parents are the first, I think, to go to college in their families.
Oh, wow.
And
yeah, I think my parents were first too. Yeah.
How did you ever get the idea that you could, you said you wanted to be a comedian, but how did you even get the idea that you could do that? It didn't appear like, I know that in the back of my head, I wanted to and never thought it was possible until well into my like late 20s. Yeah.
I mean, as much as my parents wanted me to like go into business or whatever, and as much as they like I hate my comedy, there's like always been this like weird support. They've always been so supportive. And like when I was a kid, my dad would say to me every day, like, remember, you can do anything you want to do as long as you practice. And so he would just always tell me I could do whatever I wanted as long as I practice. So I just always was like, yeah, I can do whatever I want. Maybe that's what they say, like people shouldn't tell kids though or something, or that's been a big problem with millennials, I guess. But worked for me.
There's a certain, I remember I went to grad school and I was a professor for a couple years.
Whoa,
and
nice.
I taught a class.
What subject?
Philosophy.
Nice.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. I taught a class on critical thinking at a small college outside of Philly.
I love critical thinking. I'm a big fan.
Well, yeah, I mean, in a certain sense, writing sketch and writing characters, and especially like thinking through character logic, like the logic of like whatever the game is of your character or whatever you're writing, I think flows out of the same stuff. But one of the things that I taught a lot of like social logic in the class and like class logic. And, one of the things I said to the students, I was like, look, all of us come from like working or middle class. Chances that any of us could become president are close to zero based on... But that's the it's the truth. Like,
Yeah.
You don't get to be president usually if you don't come from money.
Yeah.
And you don't get to... I think it's very difficult to get into this business if you don't at least come from money or come from...
Yeah.
And so I do think that like there is it depends. Like you can do anything you want lines up if you come from the right economic class maybe, or you have some kind of inroads to this business.
Yeah, but I guess you'll definitely never become president if you start out by thinking, I could never become president. Like, you won't even try.
I think under different class logic, maybe.
Or do you
That's
think
true.
it's
I just
better
don't
to
think-
be honest with people about, you're in this class, like, don't even think about it because, hey, this is how you were born into this, so sorry, buddy.
I didn't say it was like totally impossible. There are definitely pathways into certain careers, even if you don't have the right criteria.
Yeah.
For most of the same people. Like, I was thinking a lot today about like nepotism earlier, and I'm like, it's weird. I don't think it's just show business. I think business in general, or I think most things work by nepotism, and it happens to be this weird kind of dynamic where it sucks up every kind of person. So you could have like totally incompetent people like Meghan McCain, but you could also have. I talked to the guys that made. Did you see Wild Wild Country, that documentary on Netflix?
Yeah.
I talked to the guys that made that.
Oh wow.
A couple months ago. They're amazing and cool. They're also the nephews, I think, of why can't I think? Kurt Russell.
Good for them. Kurt Russell is so cool.
He's very cool, and they happen to be very good at what they do.
Yeah.
So it sucks up all kinds of people, and it's just a weird dynamic. So I think like
nepotism's real for sure.
Yeah. So I think you can like push past some of those things, or you can find other ways in sometimes. But I think like statistically, I guess that's what I meant.
Oh yeah, that's accurate. Yeah, statistically the odds are against you for sure.
So that's why I'm trying to like figure out, you come from the South Hills. Do you know like what economic class you were in when you were growing up?
Like probably upper middle class. I never like had to want for anything, and I grew up in an area that was known as the bubble because everybody was just like well off. Like I wasn't like super well off or anything. Like excuse me. I was well off and never had to want for anything, but there were kids who had like hot air balloons at their birthday parties, which was like next level,
Jesus.
Yeah. So, but my parents definitely like worked really hard for everything, and they both worked and had jobs, but there was a range of like, like I guess like middle to upper middle. There was like middle to definitely upper class. Like in the neighborhood that I lived in, there were like huge mansions like a couple blocks over, so I was definitely privileged for sure, but I didn't have any connections to the entertainment industry.
Again, I'm just comparing like my childhood with yours. That's all. I'm just projecting my own kind of.
Oh yeah, please do.
And you had this like one kind of you had this one impulse, this kind of like weird impulse, and this weird I want to say like theatrical or creative impulse that was like, if you came maybe from like a working class background, or from if your parents were maybe less you can do whatever you want, less encouraging, I wonder if that impulse would have like been repressed or found a different. I mean, it's a counterfactual. You can't really say, but I think it is really interesting that like that maybe that space, both the economic space and your parents, like the emotional space, allowed you to flourish as a person.
And also like having economic support from my family, like allowed me to have this safety net to fail. So like, I didn't really care about like trying to be a comedian because I was like, well, if I fail, my parents will send me money, or I can just, worst comes to worst, I can just move back home, and they'll take me in, and like I had a safety net.
Did you ever want, like, I think about that too. I'm like, I guess if I failed, I could move back to Reading, but it's not like I never
would want to do that. No.
It's not a positive thought. That's like a last ditch.
Yeah. I mean, they're always there to support me, but they're also like really encourage like hard work. And so like, they definitely supported me financially, but then also my mom's like, if you can't, she's like, I'm not going to pay for your groceries. So if you can't afford them, you need to like call on the government for help, you know? And so like I was like a barista on food stamps for a sec.
So there's also this like the hardworking part also I think contributes to it too, because you're not you know there are a lot of awfully lazy people who are willing to kind of just like skate by on their connections maybe even. But you have you may be weird, but you also are hardworking and weird.
I'm definitely a workaholic for sure.
Oh yeah. Oh, I get that too. Naomi, we had to like in couples therapy like a couple months ago. She's like, you have to address this. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't just be sitting here like 10 hours a day writing and working on stuff. You have to live
relax
a life.
That's something that my friends have taught me or try to teach me a lot. And I think I've done a better job this past year, but they're like, you need to relax. You need to take time off in order to like restore and be the best artist you can be. Yeah, but that's a good lesson to like relax. But even when I am relaxing, I can only do it for a certain amount of time before I become anxious and think like I need to work on something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Because there's nothing. Again, I can always move back home, I guess, at some point and live with my parents. I guess I could live in my old room, even though it's like filled with like litter boxes at this point. And
and cats.
But, yeah. Well, the cats get to go wherever they want,
but
but
for
their
them.
litter boxes are in my old room. But the I constantly think, I'm like, it's on me. There's no one else that's looking out for me necessarily. Obviously, like agents, whatever, Naomi and friends, things. But like, I'm the engine.
Yeah.
That is moving this thing, and if I don't keep writing and keep pushing stuff, then I just could end up like, I always have this like vision in my head of like I'm in a robe and boxers and a t-shirt, like a white t-shirt, and I'm sitting in a recliner eating like a lean cuisine, and that's the rest of my life.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big fear.
Yeah. And so I like push against that constantly.
Yeah. I always say that I won't relax, or I used to say like I can't relax until I'm successful. And it's like, well, what do I define as successful? And that's like, I need to be able to have a dog. I need to like I have this like list of things that like until I have time to like have a dog and like take proper care of it, I'm not yet successful. Like as long as I'm still grinding my ass, it's like there's still more work to be done. When I can have a dog, maybe that's like a little bit of a litmus test. I don't know. Maybe I'll let myself have a dog sooner rather than later. But
do it.
I really want a dog.
We just fostered a dog for a little while, and it was amazing. Naomi has a joke about like when she landed at LAX, she got off the plane. She's like, I want a dog and a podcast. And there's something about this city that like I don't know what it is about it that you want to have a dog.
Oh my gosh, they're just the best. And it's a little bit of an isolating city, so to have a dog is like a little companion.
Did you find Pennsylvania emotionally repressed at all, like living there?
Oh my God, yes. So everybody there is like, well, at least where I'm from, everybody is, and likes to drink and watch sports.
Yeah.
But I love you guys. But yeah, there's definitely a good art scene there as well. But I'd say for the most part, it's like not as like emotionally expressive, of course, as like Portland or LA or New York, you know, the coastal cities. It's just like classic Midwest, you know?
I mean, anytime Naomi meets any of my friends from Pennsylvania, she's like, oh, you guys are all the same. We all like talk in a kind of like flattened way, and it takes a long time, if at all, we'll ever talk about what's going on inside.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely with some of my close friends, I can always talk about like what's going on inside, but those are like my theater people, you know. Yeah, but definitely to the ones who are close, they'll open up. Yeah.
But you did theater in high school?
Yes, and middle school and just pretty much all my life. I did a one-woman show when I was 5 of The Little Red Hen, which was a kid's book, and I put it up for my class, which I think was an assignment for all the kids. I think all the kids had to recite their favorite storybook, but I made it into a play with the help of my mom. My mom's pretty crafty, and both my parents are really creative, but I don't think ever fully sought that out career wise, because it just wasn't something they ever thought of. But they're both really creative people.
Do you ever think about the way your brain works? When you're coming up with a character or a sketch or an idea.
Yeah.
And this may be a vague question, but how does it form in your head, or how do you think through it?
I typically start with an image, the image of a character. What would this person sound like? What would this person be like? Or I do a character that's a worm, and I'm oh,
I remember that.
What would it be like to be a worm? So I first picture whoever the character is, and then try to think of what their perspective is, and then I almost always try to think of what they want, their objective, and then that becomes really easy to play and to improvise a bit. And so whenever I'm coming up with a new 5 or 10 minute bit, or even a solo show, I will beat out a piece based on what I think that character wants or wants to communicate. And I'll just have beats or an outline of where I want to get to, and then improvise and play around with it and see if the audience gives me any ideas too. Yeah.
Do you think that kind of empathy goes back to your childhood? That idea of you both have this kind of imagistic thinking, right? Mm-hmm. You think, my brain sometimes it wavers between these two different states where I think in images, and then I think it's actually almost all images now that I'm saying this out loud. I have the same kind of thing. And then there's this kind of almost empathetic, putting yourself in the place of that image.
Yeah.
Do you, I mean, I don't know if you can even remember this, but do you think you thought like that when you were younger?
I think because, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of fighting going on when I was a kid, and still now, in my immediate family, and then especially my dad's family, they're all a little bit hoo-hoo, but love them. But I think I was able to empathize with those people because, they were they would act so crazy with each other, but they were people that I loved. So I think I tried to often put myself in their shoes.
Okay. I think I get this more. So they would do something. I don't know if there's any example you can
inexplicable give that or oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say if there's any example you feel comfortable giving, but X behavior, and then you would be oh, why did they?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one that I feel comfortable sharing. None come to mind.
Whatever, we'll say X behavior, and so then you're why would this person? Why would Y person do X behavior?
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, it was pretty much that. Why would this? Yeah, and yeah, I was just trying to empathize with people that I loved for doing really bizarre or selfish things. Even I don't know, recently my dad's family side of the family all got in a big fight. This is so personal. But it's they're all, and I'm sure there's more that goes along with this, but no, I can't say. I'm sorry. They're just weird. They fight over little things, or I'm sure it all stems from insecurity as well. There was a family event where a certain person in my family wanted me to take off. I was in second grade, and this person wanted me to take off a dress because it was distracting from her daughter and it was her daughter's day. It was our communion. And she wanted me to take off my communion dress at her daughter's communion party. But I didn't understand at the time, like as a kid. Anyways, it was a big fight about like a kid wearing a dress.
I think
you see what I mean?
I do. Going back to when I talked about Murder Fist.
Yeah.
But like a lot of that stuff is the same kind of thing where it's like, here's the psychology. I mean, it's not like, I'm not calling your family this, but here's the psychology of a lunatic.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to play that psychology.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's maybe where it comes from, like wanting to step into like the shoes of other minds. Yeah. But yeah, some definitely crazy stuff happens. But, I think everybody's got that, some form of that.
But that makes a lot of sense. If I can, not to wrap this up in a bow, but if I can say this, I think it makes a lot of sense for your sketch specifically or for the characters you create because they're, again, I use the word unhinged. I don't know if you want to, but like the psychology is crazy.
They're often, flawed.
Yes. But it's not like, but the things you make aren't inaccessible or just like so far onto the weird spectrum, right? So there's a certain like that empathy, I think, is what helps. Again, I'm comparing to myself where I was just writing like layered, like I couldn't be vulnerable in any of that stuff because that vulnerability would have revealed something about me and I was too scared to do that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a certain kind of empathy in the stuff you make.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I think I try to like present characters that are unhinged or flawed in a way, but I like for the audience to also feel for them, empathize with them.
Yeah.
So I like that you say that.
It is very British in that sense where like if you watch a lot of British TV, it's about flawed characters trying to live their lives.
Yeah. I do a lot of shows over in the UK and they take well to it, so maybe that's why.
Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me and letting me talk about my crazy family.
How do you feel? Good, bad?
I feel, I feel good. That was fun.
I don't know how people take to the show sometimes.
Oh no, I love talking about it. It's cool to like also hear you like kind of like analyze my process or whatever. I like it.
Cool. All right.
Cool.
We'll see you guys next
Thanks
time.
so much. Thanks, Andy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye.